Welcome to the October 13th segment for Citizens Forum. My name is Warren Lokke, and I'm privileged today to talk again about technology and its interaction with society. The last time I had Mike Irvine speak about ocean awareness and technology, and today I'm talking about technology and its intersection with access to justice, specifically about a groundbreaking initiative within British Columbia known as the Civil Resolution Tribunal, and its acronym, the CRT. And with me today is its chair, Shannon Salter. Shannon, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Warren.
So, first things first, can you just give us an example, or what is the Civil Resolution Tribunal?
So the Civil Resolution Tribunal is the first online tribunal in Canada. We're planning for it to open sometime late next year. And it's not just the first online tribunal in Canada, it's actually one of the first in the world. So BC's really being a groundbreaker in this area.
So we're kind of the guinea pigs for this.
Well, I think we're a very progressive justice society, and it's a really exciting way to improve access to justice for British Columbians.
Okay, so just about what is the background of the history of this? Just how did it get to this point where we're going to, have it in the next short while?
Well, British Columbia, like other areas in Canada and around the world, has an access to justice crisis. We know that wait times for getting to court are quite lengthy. Issues are complex, it's time-consuming for people, it's expensive, and it's really, really difficult to navigate the court system if you don't have legal training in many cases. So what the Civil Resolution Tribunal is trying to do is trying to bring the justice system to where people are, instead of requiring them to find their own way within it. Mm-hmm. So what that means for the average person is that if you have an everyday civil justice claim, a debt problem, contract, personal injury issue below $25,000, so small claims, or if you have a strata dispute, and we know there's 1.5 million people in BC who either live in, work in, or rent a strata, it's a big part of the population. If you have one of these everyday disputes, instead of going to court, you'd have the alternative to go to the CRT. And you could access the CRT from the comfort of your home or your coffee shop or an office, wherever you happen to be, and would be able to get dispute resolution services through an online process for the most part.
Okay, so it's not like where I go to court and it's from pretty much just regular working day hours from Monday to Friday. I can do this anytime then?
That's right. So any time from anywhere that you have an internet connection. So we know people have busy lives, and so this will let somebody who has a day job, for instance, maybe kids, other community obligations, to work on their dispute in the evening after their day is done, after their kids are in bed, when they have a moment to think and have a moment to really devote to resolving their dispute. So whenever and wherever it works for them.
It's convenience. Okay, so I'm just thinking about this in terms of a hypothetical maybe. What would be kind of a real-world example that you would have of this?
Okay, so say you're in a position where you have a dispute with your neighbor. It might be over a tree, over a fence, or it's one of those everyday kind of issues that comes up.
Sure.
You might start by looking at the Solution Explorer, which is going to be the front end of the CRT. Okay. And what it is a guided pathway system. So it comes from evidence that suggests if you just Googled dispute with your neighbor, you'd reach 1,000 different hits, and only a very small part of that would be useful.
Yeah.
So instead, we're trying to give people very targeted pieces of legal information in very plain language. So the Solution Explorer might ask you some questions, like what's your dispute about? You'd say, I have a dispute with my neighbor. And then it would ask you some more questions. And this would be a bit of a back and forth dialogue. And along the way, you might be given tools, like, for example, a letter that's already pre-written for you that you could fill in the blanks and give to your neighbor as an attempt to resolve the dispute. So the Solution Explorer is a way to give people tools and resources to resolve the dispute themselves without ever having to use any justice system process.
And I guess not even having to hire a lawyer or anything like that as well?
That's right. People are free to get legal advice, of course, but we know that many people can't afford to hire a lawyer, especially for these lower level civil disputes.
Yeah.
So what it does is gives them that legal information in a bite-sized, very tailored way, as well as tools to go off and resolve their disputes. So at that point, the person would either attempt to resolve the dispute themselves directly with their neighbor, perhaps. But if they weren't able to do that, then at least they understand their legal claim better, and they understand sort of whether they're on solid ground or not so solid ground. From that point, the person could then start a CRT claim. And they would go through an intake process, they'd have to give notice to their neighbor, but then they'd be given an opportunity to negotiate directly. So the first stage is negotiation. Everything in the CRT is really focused on trying to help people resolve their disputes early, because we know that the longer somebody has a justice process, the more it harms them in all kinds of ways, physically, emotionally, financially. It escalates, and it gets more and more intractable. So if we can devote lots of resources at the front end to getting people in and out of the process quickly, then that's going to be better for their well-being.
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. So so can you just describe the process maybe further along? Say that the first step didn't go through. Now we're at
what's next?
Yeah, what's next exactly?
So the negotiation phase is very limited. It's really an off-ramp. Can the parties avoid spending more time and money on their dispute? If they're relatively close in their positions, they might be able to do that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes people need help. And so that's when we get to the next phase of the tribunal, which we're calling the facilitation phase. And that's where a facilitator, who's somebody with specialized dispute resolution skills, works with the parties, wherever they happen to be, and through whichever communication method they prefer, over a period of time to help them reach a consensual resolution to their problem. And if they're able to do that, then that agreement can be turned into a binding tribunal order, which it becomes enforceable as a court order. So the parties have some finality. What they're getting at the end of the process is a binding, enforceable court order eventually. So we think most disputes will be resolved in this facilitation phase. And there's lots of evidence that shows that, for the most part, people, when given the opportunity and support, are able to resolve their dispute consensually. But the last phase of the tribunal, if people are not able to resolve the dispute through facilitation, is adjudication. And that's where a tribunal member who's a lawyer with specialized expertise either in strata or in civil justice claims will make a binding decision after hearing the evidence and considering the parties' arguments.
Well, so I mean, a lot of it's very similar to what already goes on, but instead you don't have to deal with the backlog of the court system.
Well, in some ways it's similar. We have pilot programs in BC that focus on mediation, and they've been excellent. So part of the CRT's methodology has come out of the successes of those programs. The trouble with those programs, though, is that they're only in a couple of locations in the province, and they're only for a limited period of time. And so what we're hoping to do is to really expand on that and democratize it by giving access to people who might be living in rural areas of BC and not have ready access to a courtroom. And we also know that sometimes people will come to a mediation and walk away without making an agreement, but if they had a chance to sleep on it or to talk to their partner or to a friend, they might be able to come back and reach an agreement. So by letting this be a bit more of a protracted process and spreading it out over days if necessary, then we know that we're going to be able to really give the best service possible to people.
Yeah, no, that's true, because I guess a lot of times mediations, over the course of just one day, if you can just, elongate that process, you can have people, percolate on these ideas, and then from there, possibly get to the idea of a settlement or a resolution, that might be a little bit more attainable. True.
Yeah, and we know people need support throughout this process as well, and so this facilitator role is really quite extraordinary.
Yes.
People sometimes think of the CRT as a tech-based online program, but really it's about using technology as a tool to connect the right people together. It's really a human-driven process. So these facilitators are highly trained humans who are helping the parties. Similarly, the adjudicators are highly trained legal experts who are deciding cases for people.
All right, so I'm just thinking maybe about the people who may be a little bit more uncomfortable or unfamiliar with using a computer for this type of a process. What supports are available to them in that regard?
And that's a really good question, because this is an Access to Justice project, and you can't call something really an Access to Justice project if you aren't including everybody who needs to use it. Yes. So we are going to be able to offer mail and telephone-based services for people who can't access technology or, as you say, aren't comfortable with it. But I think we need to be careful in terms of thinking about who is and is not using technology. So some research shows that in BC, 92% of British Columbians use the internet every single day for all kinds of different things. And one statistic that surprised me is that 69% of people in BC over the age of 74 also use the internet every day. So I think we have to challenge some of our ideas about whether the older generation is able to use technology, because for the most part they are, and they're doing it every day.
That's good to know, because then it actually makes us, an accessible system in itself.
Yeah, and technology isn't the cure-all for everything.
No.
But it is a bit of an equalizer in the sense that many more people have access to the internet than they might to other parts of the justice system.
And more people would have access to the internet than being close to, say, a courthouse to do this, and having to take off time from their job, to deal with a small claims court. This has, removed a lot of those problems.
Exactly, and those are all access barriers. And so to the extent that we can do that, to the extent that we can better serve people in rural areas of BC who don't have ready access to courthouses or legal services, then that is going to increase access to justice.
Perfect. Well, I guess we're running almost to the end, but lastly, if people want to find further information about the Civil Resolution Tribunal, where can they get it?
Well, we have an implementation website. You can go to civilresolutionbc.ca, and you can find out where we are with implementation, get a little bit more information about how it will work. We have guest blogs from all kinds of different voices in the stakeholder community. We really want to listen to people, and that's a lot of what we're doing. There's also a way to get in touch with us if you have questions or comments, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. I'm really glad that you came here and you took the trip over the ferry to be here for me. So thanks so much.
My pleasure, Warren. I appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.